Hey guys, Tyler here. Throughout the history of Star Trek, we've seen varied depictions of a major aspect of both human and alien culture: religion. It's fairly well known that franchise creator Gene Roddenberry was a critic of religion, who made his views on the matter rather clear in early episodes of The Next Generation. But Deep Space Nine gives us another perspective on faith, not just from the Bajoran viewpoint, but also from other human viewpoints too. As subsequent installments of Trek have offered even further exploration of religion, it's prompted some really interesting conversations about the role of faith in human society. Star Trek's secular future is increasingly diverse in its representation, but what exactly is the status of religion on Earth in the 24th century? In this video, I won't focus as much on alien mythologies, instead answering the question,
what does God need with a starship?
Okay, seriously, let's dive in. First, let's establish a brief overview of how faith has been portrayed in Star Trek over the years. In Enterprise, Phlox makes references to multiple Earth religions, particularly Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christianity. During his time on Earth, he attended a mass at St. Peter's Square in Rome, and he also studied the Eastern faiths to gain a deeper understanding of humanity. By the early 23rd century, as we learn in Discovery, comparative religion is a subject taught in the Federation, including by Christopher Pike's father. The original series features numerous allusions to Christianity, like a chapel on the Enterprise, and occasional vague references to a god, at least in a deistic sense. TNG's Who Watches the Watchers is arguably one of, if not the, first really strong declaration from a Trek character likening religion to a negative influence on society. When discussing the ramifications of human interference in the Mintakan culture, Jean-Luc Picard fears their worship of him could descend into inquisitions, holy wars, and chaos.
Send them back into the dark ages of superstition and ignorance and fear? No!
On the other hand, in DS9's Penumbra, Cassidy Yates mentions her mother would want her daughter to be married by a minister. Clearly, Picard's view of religion, kind of a Roddenberry self-insert, let's not kid ourselves, is not shared by every other human in the 24th century. But is it even shared by a majority of humanity? By 2070, in our real world, Islam is expected to become the dominant religion on the planet, overtaking Christianity. Most of the growth will occur in sub-Saharan Africa with its high fertility rates, which will begin to stabilize by the late 21st century. India, now the most populous country on Earth, will overtake Indonesia as the country with the most Muslims, though India's larger population of Hindus will continue to outnumber Muslims in the region. Demographic trends beyond 2100 are sort of hard to come by, and matters are further complicated by World War III. Strange New Worlds tells us that the conflict wiped out 1/3 of the human population, which by 2053 would probably be in the neighborhood of 3 billion people. It would take multiple generations to recover these numbers, but various canon and non-canon sources imply that by the time of Star Trek, Earth's population has stabilized again at 9 billion. Thus, we can assume that our planet's demographics may be broadly similar to mid-21st century levels, hence why Islam, Christianity, and humanity's other faiths are still kicking in some form. That said, there would be some significant differences given the centuries of social, political, and economic evolution Earth has undergone in Star Trek. A 2009 poll by Gallup shows a modest but real decline in adherence to Christianity by Americans since 1965. The long-term trend suggests a possible disappearance of Christianity from US culture by 2240, 2.5 decades before James T. Kirk begins his 5-year mission. The vast majority would thus be atheist or agnostic, a trend that was observed in Europe at a far earlier date. However, even in Star Trek's secular socialist future, as I've already established, Christianity does still persist among some people. This is not surprising, although it's important to keep in mind that multiple things can be true at the same time. On the one hand, despite our current polarized political climate, the evidence does point towards a long-term secularization of American culture. That it would take centuries is beside the point. But between the trauma of World War III and other factors, is it natural to expect that in the 23rd and 24th centuries that Christians would still at least be a minority group on Earth? Certainly. Some theologians and denominations will struggle to cope with the existence of extraterrestrials, but others will adapt. That sort of societal evolution is inevitable. Religion has always been part of human civilization in one form or another, and that will continue to be true far into the future. Secular doesn't mean completely without faith, it just means that Earth isn't a theocracy. But how does this connect with Earth's economy in Star Trek? This video obviously isn't about Star Trek's economy itself, especially since I already made a video about that. But that video is really old, and I can no longer attest to its quality. In any event, these days, we're getting something of a clearer picture as to how Earth's economy functions in-universe. As countless others have pointed out, it's impossible to discuss this topic without invoking socialism. And indeed, I've already done that in this video too. Don't blame me, they openly describe their society that way on at least one occasion. It's diegetic, bitch.
I still have a bunker in Vermont where I used to live in case this whole no money socialist utopia thing turns out to be a fad.
Besides flowery words like utopia, they also use phrases like post-scarcity, further implying a distribution of resources that is quite different from our current capitalist model. Their use of money is also somewhat ambiguous, a feature of communism, though clearly the Federation credit exists, at least for luxury items. Okay, but what does that have to do with religion? Well, there's long been a correlation between socialist states and atheism. Authoritarian Marxist regimes in the Cold War, like the Soviet Union, East Germany, and Czechoslovakia, as well as China today, have incorporated state atheism in some way, shape, or form. In practice, this has mostly taken the form of what is called anti-clericalism, or the opposition to religious institutional power and influence in public life. That said, the Chinese government formally recognizes Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, and Taoism. Most Han Chinese people do not consider their spiritual beliefs to be a religion, though they do take part in the rituals and festivities of the lunar calendar. But China is often considered a home to humanism and secularism. Those are interesting words. Humanism and secularism. We've established what secularism looks like at the public and individual level throughout this video. It's, broadly speaking, the same thing as the separation of church and state, the conducting of human affairs without the involvement of religion. But what is humanism? Well, it's a philosophical stance emphasizing the potential of human beings, both in our individual interactions as well as our impact on society. That's a very Star Trek concept, you know? We hear time and time again throughout the franchise that humans are on a mission to better themselves and their communities. It's why they've abandoned the acquisition of wealth as the main driving force in their lives. While Gene Roddenberry's views on religion can be felt in early TNG, the man didn't really describe himself as an atheist. He was a humanist. So in that sense, I think that maintaining that aspect of Gene Roddenberry's personality in Star Trek, even beyond his death, is rather important. It's not even about Roddenberry himself or Gene's vision, it's about the idea of humanism. Secular humanism is one of the defining traits of humanity at large in the Trek universe. And so you can see why there is a connection between religion and Star Trek and Earth's economy. Right now, capitalism is the dominant economic system on Earth, and over 80% of the Earth's population is religious. Many of these faiths are tied to centuries or even millennia of cultural traditions that predate the emergence of free market capitalism during the Italian Renaissance. But the connection between religion and capitalism cannot be understated. Trying to distill the true depth of this connection would be a task too large for the runtime of this video, but in a nutshell, let me try to explain where I'm ultimately going with this. One major criticism of organized religion today has to do with exploitative power structures. Evangelizing religions often seek to draw in new members with the promise of salvation should they contribute part of their income to the church, a practice called tithing. This is most common with Christianity, and a form of it can also be found in newer movements like Scientology. Throughout history, colonizing European powers have spread Christianity just as they've spread capitalism, converting native populations of other parts of the world to both systems. America is considered to be the most developed economy in the world, and it also has a relatively high rate of Christian adherence compared to other developed nations. Meanwhile, European countries, with their larger welfare states, are more culturally secular than the United States, and adherents to radical political movements like anarchism often seek to liberate the working class from religious power structures. Now, I'm not an anarchist myself, but why am I mentioning it? Well, Star Trek's economy does have some parallels with anarchism. Even though there are obviously hierarchies in human society, such as the United Earth and Federation governing bodies, as well as the chain of command in Starfleet, the concept of mutual aid does ring synonymous with Trek humans' humanistic outlook. All of this is to say, in a world where one's material needs are met, there's no doubt in my mind that fewer people would feel the need to turn to religion to cope with the stresses of everyday life. But before we conclude this video, there's still one key question that I haven't answered. Why? Why are there still people in the 24th century who adhere to Earth's mainline religions? The answer might be simpler than you think. Ever since 1993, Star Trek has dealt with the supernatural on a much larger scale than ever before. While TOS had its Apollo moments, its what does God need with a starship moments, DS9 really ramped up the spirituality in the form of Bajor's prophets, and in later media like Lower Decks, we get further glimpses into a sort of afterlife that Trek characters might experience, complete with elements like the Black Mountain and the Space Koala. Clearly, on some level, the soul exists in Star Trek, a fact built upon by the introduction of the Katra in TOS. At the end of the day, there are still profound questions about the nature of the universe that humans haven't answered, even centuries from now. Many choose to take a more empirical, scientific approach, while others still turn to their faith. Like I said, this has been true throughout history, and it will continue to be true. Religion in Star Trek's future may more so take the form of a philosophical stance or a cultural tradition than anything else. And even for those who serve in Starfleet, the franchise's rough analog to both NASA and the US military, their faith does not preclude them from participating in Starfleet's exploratory mission. Lest you think scientists of this sort can't be religious, just remember that on Christmas Eve 1968, the crew of Apollo 8 read from the book of Genesis as they orbited the moon.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep.
With that, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a thumbs up down below and don't forget to share it. That stuff really helps me out. If you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to do that as well so you won't miss future uploads, and click the bell icon to receive all notifications. If you want to support my work even further, you can become a patron at patreon.com/OrangeRiver, link in the description, or become a YouTube member by clicking the join button on my channel page. By becoming a patron, remember you get access to awesome perks like behind-the-scenes photos and videos, patron and member-only polls, name in the credits, merch discounts, and more. Or you can drop a one-time super thanks or PayPal donation. All are appreciated. Links to my PayPal as well as my social media and merch store are in the description too. That's all I have for this week. Live long and prosper.